There comes a time in life when everything you believe will be brutally tested. Not in theory, not in coffee shop conversation, but in a situation where the choice is simple and terrible. You uphold your values or you survive. Most people never reach that point. We live in the comfortable illusion that we will never have to choose between our integrity and our lives. But Daniel's story is different. He didn't have the luxury of that illusion. In his early 80s, after decades of serving empires, this man was dragged into a den full of hungry lions because he refused to stop praying. Think about that for a second. 80 years, a lifetime of impeccable service, respected by kings, feared by enemies, admired even by those who hated him. And yet, there he was, being thrown to wild animals because he wouldn't compromise on something as simple as opening a window and praying 3 times a day. The question isn't whether Daniel was brave. The question is, how does one get to that point? How does a human being develop integrity so solid that they'd rather die torn apart than pretend for 30 days? Because, let's be honest, God would understand, right? Pray in the closet. Pray in silence. Wait for the decree to pass. 30 days is nothing compared to a lifetime of service. But Daniel didn't think so. And the most disturbing thing is that this decision wasn't made in the lion's den. It was made 70 years earlier, when he was 15, and said no to a plate of food. Integrity isn't built in moments of crisis. It's revealed in them. Daniel didn't become whole in the den. He was already whole when he entered it. And that's the truth no one wants to hear. The lions you face today were decided by the choices you made when no one was looking. You may never be thrown into a literal pit, but have you ever been pressured to lie in a report, to omit information, to participate in gossip, to pretend to agree with something that violates your conscience? These are your lions, smaller, more subtle, but equally deadly to your integrity. And the question this story asks is not, would you be brave in the lion's den? The real question is, are you showing integrity at the dinner table? Because if you compromise on the small things, there will be no strength for the big ones. Daniel spent 70 years saying no to invisible commitments. So when the visible commitment came, the answer was already formed. He didn't need to think. He didn't need to calculate. He didn't have a crisis of conscience. He opened the window, knelt, and prayed as he always did. And God shut the lions' mouths. The year was 605 BC, and Jerusalem was being torn apart. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, hadn't come to negotiate. He came to conquer, plunder, and humiliate. The walls that had protected generations were torn down like toys. The temple that symbolized God's presence was desecrated. The people, who thought themselves inviolable, discovered that God does not protect those who abandon him. And in the midst of this chaos, Nebuchadnezzar had a strategic idea. Don't kill Jerusalem's best young men. Enslave their minds. Take the most intelligent, the most well-born, the most promising. Take them to Babylon. Train them. Re-educate them. Transform them into Babylonians who look like Jews. And Daniel was among them. 15, perhaps 16, the son of a noble family, possibly of royal lineage. Intelligent, handsome, without any physical defects, perfect to be a trophy of the empire. The journey from Jerusalem to Babylon was approximately 1,400 kilometers, on foot, in chains, along with hundreds of other captives. Imagine what goes through the mind of a teenager in this situation. Your city has been destroyed, your temple desecrated, your family has likely been killed or enslaved. Everything you knew is gone. And now you're walking toward a place that represents everything your faith has always condemned. Babylon was the center of idolatry, magic, astrology, everything a devout Jew should avoid. Daniel wasn't going on a cultural exchange. He was being dragged into the heart of God's enemy, and there was nothing he could do. No choice, no control, just the road, the chains, and the uncertainty of what would come. When he finally arrived in Babylon, Daniel must have felt the visual impact of the most advanced city in the ancient world. The Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders. Walls so thick that chariots raced atop them. Marduk's ziggurat, a tower that seemed to touch the sky. Palaces covered in brilliant blue tiles. Everything in Babylon screamed a message. Your gods are greater than your God. Your empire is stronger than your people. Your culture is superior to your tradition. And now you will learn this, not through violence, but through seduction. Daniel wasn't thrown into prison. He was placed in an elite program, 3 years of training in the king's court. the best teachers, the finest. Accommodations, food from the royal table. He was being prepared to serve the most powerful man in the world, and all he had to do was forget who he was. Nebuchadnezzar's palace wasn't just a building, it was a statement of power. Every architectural detail, every decoration, every protocol was there to communicate one thing. The king is divine, and you are fortunate to serve him. Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were handed over to Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch, responsible for transforming Jews into Chaldeans. The training was comprehensive: Chaldean language, Babylonian literature, science, astrology, dream interpretation, court protocol, all designed to reprogram the minds of these young men. Erase Jerusalem. Erase the God of Israel. Erase Jewish identity. Insert Babylon. Insert the gods of Marduk. Insert loyalty to the empire. It was sophisticated brainwashing disguised as elite education, and it worked in most cases, but not with Daniel. The first major decision came early on: food. The king ordered that the young men receive a daily portion of the food he ate and the wine he drank. It wasn't cruelty, it was privilege. It was honor. The king's food was the best in the empire, prepared by the best cooks with the finest ingredients. To refuse it would be an insult. But Daniel had a problem. That food wasn't kosher. It came from animals sacrificed to idols. It was prepared in a way that violated Jewish dietary laws. Eating it wasn't just nutrition. It was spiritual participation in a system that denied the God of Israel. And here's the test most people fail. It was just food. No one dies from eating non-kosher meat. God won't send lightning. It's a ceremonial rule, not a moral one. But Daniel understood something profound. Integrity isn't about the size of the rule. It's about who you are when no one important is looking. Daniel resolved in his heart not to defile himself. It wasn't an emotional decision. It was a firm resolution. He didn't wait to see if he would have the courage at the time. He decided beforehand, and that decision guided his action. He went to Ashpenaz and asked not to be forced to eat that food. He wasn't rebellious. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't make a speech about religious superiority. He was respectful, humble, but firm. And Ashpenaz had a problem. He liked Daniel, but he was afraid of Nebuchadnezzar. "If you become weaker than the other young men, the king will cut off my head," he said. It was a legitimate fear. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't known for being understanding of failures, so Daniel proposed a test. 10 days. Give us only vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the king's food, and decide based on the result. It was a smart, measurable, and low-risk proposal. Ashpenaz agreed. For 10 days, Daniel and his friends ate vegetables while the others devoured feasts. Imagine the social pressure. The other young men must have scoffed. "You're crazy. You're missing out on the best food in the world because of ancient rules." But at the end of the 10 days, the result was undeniable. Daniel and his friends were healthier, stronger, and better looking than anyone who ate the king's food. It wasn't magic, it was principle. When you honor God in the little things, he honors you in the results. Ashpenaz was so impressed that he allowed them to continue the diet. And here's the lesson that changes everything. Integrity in small things prepares you for big tests. Daniel wasn't just choosing vegetables. He was building the muscle of conviction that would one day save him from the lions. Every no to a smaller commitment strengthened his ability to say no to the commitment that would cost him his life. The 3 years of training passed, and when the young men were presented to the king, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar kept them in the palace, and Daniel began his impossible career, 70 years serving 4 different kings in 2 distinct empires. This doesn't happen by accident. Palace politics are brutal. People are discarded for the smallest mistakes. When a king dies, the new king usually cleans house, killing or exiling the predecessor's advisors. But Daniel not only survived, he thrived. Why? Because integrity creates trust, and trust creates irreplaceable value. Daniel had no schemes. He had no hidden agendas. He didn't flatter. He didn't lie. He didn't manipulate. He simply served with excellence and spoke the truth. And this, ironically, made him indispensable in a world full of liars. The first great demonstration of God's favor toward Daniel came when Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream. The king woke up sweating, terrified, knowing he had seen something important but couldn't remember what it was. So he did something absurd. He summoned all the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldeans in the kingdom and demanded that they tell him what the dream was and what it meant. The wise men protested, "No king has ever asked such a thing. Tell us the dream, and we will interpret it." But Nebuchadnezzar was testing them. "If you truly have divine power, you should know the dream. If you can't, you are frauds." And then he decreed, "If you don't tell me the dream and its interpretation, you will all be torn to pieces, and your houses will be turned into dunghills. But if you do, you will receive gifts, rewards, and great honor." It was a death sentence impossible to escape, because no one, absolutely no one, can divine another person's dream. The decree included Daniel, even though he hadn't been at the meeting. When Arioch, commander of the guard, came to execute it, Daniel asked why the decree was so urgent. Arioch explained the situation, and Daniel, instead of panicking, asked for something bold. Time. He went to the king and asked for a deadline to reveal the dream. Nebuchadnezzar, impressed by Daniel's confidence, granted it. Daniel returned home and did the only thing he could. He prayed. He gathered his 3 friends and said, "We must ask the God of heaven for mercy concerning this mystery, so that we will not be killed with the other wise men." And they prayed all night. Not quick prayers, a desperate prayer. The prayer of someone who knows they will die if God doesn't intervene. And God intervened. During the night, he revealed the complete dream to Daniel, in a night vision. Every detail, every symbol, every meaning. Daniel didn't run to the king. First, he worshipped. "Blessed be the name of God forever, for wisdom and might belong to him. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who understand. He reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what is in darkness, and with him dwells light. To you, O God of my fathers, I thank and praise you, because you have given me wisdom and might, and now you have made known to me what we asked." This is Daniel's character. He didn't see the revelation as a personal achievement. He saw it as divine mercy. And so he went to Arioch and said, "Do not kill the wise men. Take me to the king, and I will show you the interpretation." Arioch ran with Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. The king asked, "Can you tell me the dream I had and its interpretation?" And Daniel responded, with something that sealed his reputation forever. "The mystery the king has requested. Neither wise men, nor enchanters, nor magicians, nor astrologers can reveal to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown the king what will happen in the last days." Daniel described the dream with surgical precision. Nebuchadnezzar saw a huge, terrifying statue. Its head was of fine gold. Its chest and arms were of silver. Its belly and thighs were of bronze. Its legs were of iron. Its feet were part iron and part clay. As the king watched, a stone was cut out without human hands, struck the statue's feet, and the entire structure collapsed. The stone grew and became a mountain that filled the entire earth. Nebuchadnezzar must have been in shock. It was exactly what he had seen, every detail perfect. Now came the riskiest part, the interpretation, because Daniel wasn't just going to explain symbols. He was going to prophesy the end of the Babylonian Empire, in front of the Babylonian king who held the power of life and death over him. But Daniel didn't sugarcoat the message. Truth doesn't negotiate with fear. "You, O king, are king of kings," Daniel began diplomatically but directly. "The God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. The head of gold is you." Nebuchadnezzar must have smiled. Gold, the most valuable metal, represented his empire. But then came the rest. "After you will arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, of silver. Then a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over the whole earth. And there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, which will break in pieces and crush everything." Daniel was telling the most powerful king in the world that his empire would fall, that others would come, that gold would become silver, bronze, iron, progressive degradation, and the feet of iron mixed with clay represented divided kingdoms, strong and fragile at the same time. But the most important part came now. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will crush and consume all these kingdoms, but it will endure forever. The stone cut out without hands was the kingdom of God, which would come and dominate everything. History has proven Daniel right with frightening precision. The head of gold was Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. The silver chest was the Medo-Persian Empire that conquered Babylon. The belly of bronze was the Greek Empire under Ptah, Alexander the Great. The legs of iron were Rome, which crushed nations with unparalleled military might. The feet of iron and clay are interpreted as the divided kingdoms that came after Rome, never again united as a global empire. And the stone? It represents the kingdom of God established through Christ, which began small but grew to fill the earth, and which, according to prophecy, will one day destroy all human kingdoms and reign forever. Daniel was not merely interpreting a dream. He was revealing God's plan for human history, and Nebuchadnezzar recognized this. The king fell face down before Daniel and ordered offerings to be presented to him. "Truly," said Nebuchadnezzar, "your God is a God of gods, a Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries." If you're enjoying this incredible story of how integrity and faith transform impossible destinies, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Because we haven't reached the lion's den yet, you won't want to miss what happens when Daniel faces the ultimate test of his life. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any powerful stories like this. Daniel's life after interpreting the dream changed radically. Nebuchadnezzar promoted him to governor of the entire province of Babylon and appointed him chief of all the wise men. It was a position of unimaginable power for a foreign captive. Daniel now commanded the most important region of the empire and oversaw all the king's advisors. His 3 friends were also promoted to administer the province. But here's what separates Daniel from ordinary politicians. He never used power for revenge, illicit enrichment, or self-promotion. He served with the same integrity he had when he was a teenager refusing food. Power reveals character. It doesn't create it. If you are corrupt with little power, you will be more corrupt with much. If you are upright with little, you will be upright with much. Daniel proved this by serving 4 different kings over the course of 70 years. Nebuchadnezzar, Evil Merodach, Nabonidus, Belshazzar in Babylon, and then Darius and Cyrus in Persia. This is statistically impossible without deep integrity and exceptional competence. Decades passed, and Daniel continued to serve faithfully, even when Nebuchadnezzar went mad for 7 years, eating grass like an animal, fulfilling another prophecy Daniel had given. Even when lesser kings took over, and the empire began to weaken, until Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, arrived, arrogant and foolish. One night, Belshazzar decided to throw an epic party. 1,000 nobles drank wine, celebrating the greatness of Babylon. And at the height of his drunkenness, Belshazzar had a blasphemous idea. He ordered the gold and silver utensils that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem to be brought back, sacred cups used to worship the God of Israel. And Belshazzar, his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank wine from those cups while praising gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. It was a direct insult to the God of Israel, and God responded immediately. In the midst of the feast, a human hand appeared writing on the palace wall, just the hand, disembodied, fingers inscribing mysterious words on the white plaster. Belshazzar saw it and was terrified. His face paled, his legs wobbled, his knees knocked together. He cried out, bringing enchanters, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, promising riches and a third-ranking position in the kingdom. To whoever could interpret the writing, no one could. They couldn't even read the words, much less interpret them. Then the Queen Mother entered and said, "There is a man in your kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your grandfather, light, understanding, and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. Call Daniel." And Daniel, now over 80 years old, was summoned in the middle of the night to interpret what no one could. Belshazzar offered Daniel the same rewards he had offered others: purple robes, a gold chain, and 3rd place in the kingdom. Daniel responded with the calm authority of one who needs no bribe to speak the truth. "Keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else, but I will read the writing and give the interpretation." And then Daniel did something no one else would dare. He rebuked the king. "You knew all this," Daniel said, referring to how God had humbled Nebuchadnezzar. "You knew that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of men. Yet you did not humble your heart. You rose up against the Lord of heaven. You brought the vessels of his house, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them, while you praised gods who do not see, hear, or know nothing. But the God in whose hand your life is and whose are all your ways you did not glorify. It was direct confrontation. Daniel did not soften. He was not afraid. He spoke truth to power. Then Daniel read the words on the wall. Many, tekel, parson. And he interpreted, Many, God has numbered your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Parson, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. It was a death sentence for the empire, and it happened that very night. While Belshazzar was still absorbing the words, the Medo-Persian army, led by Darius and Cyrus, invaded Babylon. They had diverted the Euphrates River that ran beneath the city. Walls and entered through the dry riverbed. Belshazzar was killed. The Babylonian Empire, which seemed invincible, fell in one night. 70 years after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem, Babylon was destroyed, just as God had prophesied through Jeremiah. And Daniel, who had been taken captive at the beginning of the empire, survived to see its end, but his story was not yet over. The greatest test was yet to come. Darius the Mede assumed the kingdom. He was about 62 years old and inherited a vast and complex empire. To govern it efficiently, he divided the kingdom into 120 provinces, each with a satrap. Over these satraps, he placed 3 presidents to oversee everything and protect the king's interests. And Daniel was one of those 3 presidents. Think about it. Daniel was over 80 years old. He was from a conquered people. He had served the previous empire. And yet, Darius chose him for one of the highest positions in the new government. Why? Because reputation spans empires. Competence and integrity are rare and valuable in any system. But the story doesn't end there. Daniel wasn't just kept on the same level as the other presidents. He distinguished himself from them all. The text says he had an excellent spirit, and the king planned to place him over the entire kingdom. Daniel was about to become prime minister of the entire Medo-Persian Empire. This provoked mortal envy among the other officials. Imagine, 2 Persian presidents, native satraps, hundreds of bureaucrats in the empire, all seeing an old Jew about to be promoted above them all. It was unbearable. So they did what jealous politicians always do. They looked for errors. They investigated every decree Daniel signed, every administrative decision, every financial transaction, every report, looking for corruption, bribery, embezzlement, negligence, anything they could use to destroy him. And they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. The text is clear. They could find no occasion or fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. 70 years in power, and not a single suspicious transaction, not a single illicit favor, not a single strategic lie. This is not only impressive, it is supernatural. Because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But it did not corrupt Daniel. Integrity formed at 15 sustained him at 85. So the officials held a meeting and came to a grim conclusion. We will never find any occasion against this Daniel unless we find it against him in the law of his God. They recognized that Daniel's only vulnerability was his faith. He was untouchable in everything else. So they devised a brilliantly evil plan. They went to King Darius with thick flattery. King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, counselors, and governors have agreed to establish a royal decree and establish a prohibition. Whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions. It was a perfect trap disguised as an honor to the king. 30 days didn't seem like much. And what harm would there be in directing all prayers to the king for a month? It appealed to Darius's vanity, and the law of the Medes and Persians made any royal decree irrevocable. Once signed, not even the king could change it. Darius, flattered and unaware of the trap, signed the decree. The document was sealed with the royal ring, making it absolute law. And Daniel knew. He was informed that anyone who prayed to another god or man in the next 30 days would be thrown to the lions. Now we come to the defining moment. Daniel had options. He could stop praying for 30 days. God would understand a strategic pause. He could pray in secret, with the windows closed at night where no one would see. It would still be genuine prayer. He could travel outside the capital for a month, avoiding the situation completely. All of these were reasonable solutions that would preserve his life and his basic integrity. But Daniel considered none of them, because integrity isn't about doing the bare minimum to avoid sin. Integrity is about doing exactly what's right, regardless of the cost. And the right thing, for Daniel, was to continue doing exactly what he'd always done. When Daniel learned the decree had been signed, he went home. He entered his room and opened the windows that faced Jerusalem, the same windows he had opened 3 times a day for decades. Then he knelt and prayed, giving thanks to his God, as he always did. It wasn't an act of rebellion. It wasn't a political statement. It wasn't a martyr seeking the spotlight. It was simply Daniel being Daniel. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't defying the king. He was doing what his conscience demanded. Worship the God of Israel the way he always had, openly and consistently. The open windows were significant. Daniel wasn't hiding his faith. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't negotiating. Praying toward Jerusalem was a reminder that, even in a foreign land, serving pagan kings, his true loyalty was to God. And if it cost him his life, so be it. He didn't choose the lions. He chose integrity. The lions were the consequence. The officials knew exactly where to find him. They staked out Daniel's house and caught him red-handed, kneeling, praying, with the windows open, facing Jerusalem. That was all they needed. They immediately rushed to King Darius and made the formal accusation that Daniel, one of the captives of Judah, has not kept you, O king, nor the decree you signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Darius immediately understood he had been manipulated. He liked Daniel. He trusted him. He planned to promote him, and now he was trapped by the very law he had signed. The text says the king was greatly distressed within himself and struggled until sunset to free Daniel. He must have consulted lawyers, looked for legal loopholes, tried to nullify the decree. But the officials were relentless. Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree the king establishes can be changed. Darius was cornered. The most powerful man in the empire discovered that there are limits even to absolute power. He had signed the death warrant for his closest advisor, and there was nothing he could do to undo it. Heartbroken, Darius ordered Daniel brought and thrown into the lion's den. But before they did, the king said something revealing. Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. It wasn't mockery. It was desperate hope. Darius knew Daniel well enough to know his God was different, that there was real power there, that miracles were possible. He was essentially betting on God's faithfulness to a faithful man. Daniel was led to the den. We don't know what he felt at that moment. Fear? Probably. He was human. Peace? Certainly. He had spent his entire life trusting in God, and he wasn't going to stop now. Regret? None, because there is no regret when you do the right thing. Daniel was thrown among hungry lions, animals that were purposely kept hungry for execution. A large stone was placed across the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own ring and the rings of the nobles, so that no one could manipulate the situation and take Daniel away. And then began the longest night. For Darius, it was agony. The text says he returned to the palace and spent the night fasting. No food, no entertainment. Musical instruments were taken from him. He couldn't sleep. He spent the entire night thinking about Daniel in the den, imagining the worst, hoping for the best, knowing that at dawn he would probably find only bones. The most powerful king in the world, completely powerless to save the man he respected most. But for Daniel, it was a different night. He wasn't alone in the den. God had sent his angel, and the angel closed the lions' mouths. He didn't kill them. He didn't remove them. He didn't make Daniel invisible. He simply closed their mouths. The lions were there, hungry, capable of attacking, but supernaturally restrained. Daniel spent the night surrounded by deadly predators who couldn't touch him. It was a visual demonstration of a spiritual truth. When God protects, nothing can destroy. At dawn, as soon as it was light, Darius arose and ran to the lion's den. He didn't send a servant. He didn't wait for a report. He went himself, desperate to know what had happened. When he neared the den, he cried out in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, could your God, whom you continually serve, deliver you from the lions?" It was a question fraught with impossible hope. And then from the den came Daniel's voice, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so they wouldn't harm me, because I was found innocent before him. And also against you, O king, I have committed no wrong." Daniel was alive, unharmed, not a scratch, not a bite, not a psychological trauma. He had spent the entire night in a den full of lions and was responding to the king with the same respectful calm as always. The miracle wasn't just that he survived, it was that he survived without any physical or emotional harm. Darius was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be taken out of the den. When Daniel emerged, they examined him carefully and found no injury because he had trusted in his God. Daniel's faith didn't protect him because it was strong. It protected him because it was placed in the right God. You can have intense faith in something false and die. Daniel had consistent faith in the true God and lived. But the story doesn't end with Daniel's release. There is divine justice that must be carried out. Darius, now free to act, ordered the men who had accused Daniel to be brought, and not just them, but their wives and children as well, and he threw them into the same den of lions. It was a brutal sentence, but it revealed something important. The lions hadn't spared Daniel because they were satisfied or docile. As soon as the accusers were thrown into the den, before they even reached the bottom, the lions grabbed them and tore every bone to pieces. The difference wasn't the lions, it was God's protection of Daniel. Then Darius did something extraordinary. He wrote a decree to all nations and languages that lived throughout the earth. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree. In all the dominion of my kingdom, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will endure until the end. He delivers and saves. He performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He delivered Daniel from the power of the lions, a pagan king proclaiming the supremacy of the God of Israel to the entire empire. This happened because an 80-year-old man refused to close his window when he prayed. Because integrity has consequences that go beyond individual lives, Daniel wasn't just saving his own life when he chose to pray with the windows open. He was bearing witness to God to an entire generation. He was showing the most powerful empire in the world that there is a God above all kings, and that it is worth being faithful to him. And Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and Cyrus the Persian. He lived to be at least 90, possibly longer. He wrote the Book of Daniel, one of the most important prophetic texts in the Bible, containing visions of the end times that are still being studied today. He influenced 4 kings across 2 empires. He served faithfully for 70 years without once compromising. And he left a legacy that spans millennia. Integrity is non-negotiable, even when it costs everything. But Daniel's secret wasn't in the lion's den. The secret was in the food bowl. The decision that saved his life at 85 was made when he was 15. Because integrity isn't built in crises, it's revealed in them. Every time Daniel said no to a small commitment, he was strengthening the muscle that would one day hold firm when the choice was between prayer and life. Here's the truth no one wants to hear. You won't be upright in the lion's den if you're not upright at the dinner table. Life's great tests don't come out of nowhere. They are revelations of the character you've been forming through small, invisible choices. When you lie in the report, you're training yourself to deny your faith under pressure. When you participate in gossip, you're weakening your ability to stand alone for the truth. When you withhold information to protect your image, you're paving the way for compromising convictions when it costs you dearly to maintain them. Daniel could maintain integrity when it cost him his life, because he maintained integrity when it cost him his comfort. He could pray with open windows under penalty of death, because he prayed with open windows when there was no decree. His faithfulness was not an isolated heroic act. It was the product of decades of hidden discipline. And here's the promise that comes with consistent integrity. God shuts mouths, not always in the way we expect, not always when we want, but he shuts mouths. The lions you face today, whether literal or metaphorical, have mouths that God can shut. The person trying to destroy your career, God can shut their mouth. The impossible circumstance that seems to swallow you, God can shut their mouth. The false accusation that threatens your reputation, God can shut their mouth. But here's the condition. You need to be in the den because of integrity, not because of stupidity. Daniel wasn't thrown to the lions because he was reckless, arrogant, or attention-seeking. He was thrown because he refused to compromise his faithfulness to God. There's a huge difference between suffering the consequences of integrity and suffering the consequences of foolishness. God protects the former, not necessarily the latter. Maybe you're facing your own lions right now. Maybe it's pressure at work to do something that violates your conscience. Maybe it's a relationship that requires you to deny your values to maintain peace. Maybe it's a corrupt system that wants your silent participation. Maybe it's just the exhaustion of being honest in a world that rewards shortcuts. And you're wondering if it's worth it, if it wouldn't be easier to close the window for a while, pray in secret, do the bare minimum. After all, 30 days isn't a long time, and God would understand. But Daniel's story screams a different truth. It's not worth negotiating. It never is. Because you don't just lose the present battle when you compromise integrity. You lose the muscle you'll need for the next battle. You train your soul to bend when it should stand firm. And eventually, you wake up and realize you no longer know who you are when no one is looking. Daniel died peacefully, respected, influential, and faithful. He never had to look back and ask himself, what if I had kept my principles? Because he did, every single moment. He never had to rebuild a reputation destroyed by compromise. Never had to regain trust lost through a convenient lie. Never had to carry the weight of having denied God to save his own skin. He paid the price of integrity up front, in small, daily doses, and reaped the benefits throughout his life. While his accusers died, shattered along with their families, he emerged from the grave unharmed and more influential than before. Because God honors those who honor him, always. It may not be in your preferred time. It may not be in the way you imagine, but he honors. And when he honors, no enemy can shame him. So here's the question this story poses to you. Today, right now, where are you negotiating? What's your plate of food that you're accepting? Telling yourself it's small, that it doesn't matter. That much, that everyone else does? What's the window you're closing, promising you'll open it when the pressure passes? Because this is the decision that will determine whether you emerge from your lion's den or be torn apart in it. It's not the courage you'll have in the moment of crisis. It's the integrity you're building now, when no one important is watching, when there's no decree, when it would be so easy to just give in a little. Daniel didn't defeat the lions in the den. He defeated them 70 years earlier, when he said no to the king's plate. Everything after that was just a revelation of what was already formed. And if you are right now in the den, surrounded by lions who want to destroy you, know this. If you are there because of integrity, not because of foolishness, God can shut their mouths. He did it with Daniel. He can do it with you. But you must be willing to enter the den rather than deny your faith. You must be willing to open the windows even knowing the decree. Because faith that only works when it is secure is not faith, it is strategy. And God doesn't shut the mouths of lions for strategists. He shuts the mouths of lions for the faithful, for those who say, my God can deliver me, and even if he doesn't, I still won't bow. This is the faith that moves mountains. This is the integrity that inspires empires. This is the life worth living. Daniel was in his 80s when he faced the lions. Think about it. He could have rationalized, I've served so long, I've done so much. God would understand if I took a break now. I'm too old to die for this. But he didn't think so. Because integrity has no retirement age. Character has no senior discount. You are who you are until your last breath, or you never really were. And Daniel was integrity to the core. Not because he was special, not because he was superhuman, but because decades earlier, when no famous person was watching, when there was no audience, when he was just a captive, teenager deciding on a plate of food, he chose to be faithful. And he kept choosing every single day for 70 years until the choice was no longer a choice. It was just who he was. The question isn't whether you'll have lions in your life. You will. The question is, when they open their mouths, who will you have been for the previous 70 years? Because that's what will determine whether you emerge unscathed or shattered. Daniel emerged unscathed because he entered with integrity. It's that simple, devastatingly simple, and terribly challenging. Because it means every day matters. Every little no strengthens. Every little yes weakens. You're either building the character that will carry you through the pit, or you're eroding the foundation that will crumble when the pressure comes. There's no middle ground. There's no negotiation that works. Integrity is all or nothing, and everything is built one invisible choice at a time. If this story touched you, if you realized there are windows you need to open, dishes you need to refuse, lions you need to face, then leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because stories like this aren't entertainment. They're mirrors. They show who we are and who we need to become. And the more people see this, the more they share it. the more they let these ancient truths confront modern lives, the more Daniel stops being ancient history and becomes an urgent call. Comment below. What's your current? Lion's Den? Where do you need to open the windows? You don't need to give details that compromise you, but writing is already the first step toward action. And when you act, God shuts mouths. He always has. He always will. For those who refuse to compromise integrity, even when it costs everything,